National Virtual Workshop on Intellectual Property Rights. For day 1 and day 2, we had with us Advocate Mrs. Snigdha Sharma, founder Meglex Private Services Limited, Bangalore, who dealt with copyright and trademark respectively. And for day 3, we had with us Advocate Mrs. Ragini Shah and Advocate Rahul Dhote, partner Literates Juris, Mumbai, who dealt with US and patent laws and IPR litigation and designs respectively. Today, for day 4, we have with us Advocate Mrs. Anuradha Maheshwari, founder Lex Mantis, Advocates and Consultants, Mumbai, who shall be dealing with geographical indications. Moving towards today's session, it is requested to all the participants to fill the feedback form, which shall be circulated both on Zoom chat box as well as YouTube comment section during the session to mark your presence. Now, I would like to call upon Professor Dr. Yugal Kishore, Dean, ICFI Law School, to give welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Madam Anushmi. Respected, most learned, most promising legal consultant of the year 2020, Madam Anuradha Maheshwari ji, esteemed academicians,
thank you so much,
Pan India and professionals Pan India, my dear student friends from different part of the country. Today is the 4th day and the last day of 4 days National Virtual Workshop on IPR. So here on this occasion, we have with us a very learned, very promising, and the founder of Lex Mantis, one of the most promising IP firm. Apart from that, she is the winner of the IP Star Women of the year 2019. So we are very fortunate, madam, that despite the fact that you are so busy in your schedule, you have spared your valuable time and you are here with us today to enlighten us on IP and particularly geographical indications. And apart from that, we have in the last 4 days, number of persons were here, and the deliberations in the last 4 days were very informative and very promising also. My participants were very happy with them. So today we will be having last day. So now I request Madam Monica Kharola to please give a brief introduction of the guest, who is very widely known and a recognized IP consultant.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And I welcome all the participants to this last day of the workshop. And on behalf of ICFI Law School and all the participants, would like to welcome the esteemed speaker for the day, Advocate Anuradha Maheshwari. She is a corporate and intellectual property lawyer and also handles all commercial and real estate transactions, posh and human rights related matters. Her core area of practice includes managing and prosecuting patents, trademarks, designs, copyright applications, designing holistic protection strategies, negotiating, drafting technology transfers, licenses, and media contracts and licenses. Ms. Anuradha has advised and managed IP disputes and has engaged with reputed senior counsels in litigation matters. She has advised many startups and SMEs on entity structuring, incorporation, structuring corporate deals, and legal due diligence. She is a very established trainer in the above areas of law and has been regularly conducting workshops, lectures in IP and POSH mainly. Her clients include established corporates, large M&Es, houses to technology and manufacturing firms and startups, universities and online education providers, F&B outlets, fashion and jewelry industries, including some overseas. We welcome you, ma'am, to this workshop, and I'm sure that Today's lecture will be of immense benefit to the audience on this workshop. Over to you, ma'am.
I shall be sharing the screen, ma'am.
Yeah. So may I begin?
Yes, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, you can tell me next. I'll be changing it.
Yeah, fine. Morning to all who have joined this presentation. My sincere and heartfelt thanks to Dr. Jugal Kishore, the respected faculty of ICFI Law, Vishal Bera in particular, for giving me this opportunity to present before you all on a subject that I really enjoy a lot. And it's such a colorful subject, and it's a fitting finale for the 4-day sessions that you all had on IPRs. This subject basically is more about stories, less on law, and it's more to do with people, places, and products. These three aspects form the core of the subject of geographical indications. So to begin with geographical indications, I'd like to point out to the next slide, please, Vishal. I'd like to point out to something that we observe all the time, all around us. I often say that if you're at a railway station or if you're at an airport, you absent-mindedly will keep looking at people and their faces, and you'll keep trying to slot them. You'll say, ye Punjabi hai, ye Tamilian hai, this is a Japanese, he or she is an American, so-and-so is a Britisher. We are always trying to slot people according to the geography they come from. Likewise, we do the same thing with goods, with products that we see in the marketplace. And you would say, ye kaha ka hai? Simple thing like maybe you are buying coriander. You will ask, from where is this coriander or a dhania patta? You will ask something about the fruits you eat, something about the chilies you have. With everything that we purchase, next slide, we need to see what and where we are going. In the sense, where is this produce from? And how authentic is this thing that we are buying? So basically, you will find that both people and products are always, sometimes very overtly and sometimes very subtly, linked to the region from where they come. When we are able to associate people and product to a region, we feel satisfied. And you know what the reason for that satisfaction is? The reason for that satisfaction is very simple. We then feel that we are able to trace the origin of that person or of that product. So when I put a mango before you, the first thing, next slide please, is you will look at it and you will say, where is this mango from? And we'll say, this is an Alfonso. So you will immediately ask, really? So when we buy in the marketplace any product, the first issue for us is authenticity. So you want to check. Now I'll tell you something very silly. When we are buying things, often, let's say I'm buying one simple item like a bread. When I buy the bread, I go to the shop, ye bread de dena. But when I said ye bread de dena, what happens is I have presumed that this bread belongs to the shopkeeper who is selling. But, you know, it could have been otherwise too. The shopkeeper could have been selling stolen items. So the first thing we presume is that whoever is the seller is a genuine seller, and that the seller is selling the goods legally, lawfully, genuinely, and that the goods belong to him. So the first issue with authenticity is property and ownership. So we will always be checking, I mean, now if I go to a high value item like a car or a refrigerator, then we are able to understand the perspective of property and ownership, because then we say, make the bill in my name, transfer the property from the company to us, or from a seller to a buyer. So we bring in these questions of property and ownership in, high value items where we can understand it better. But in small value items, we don't understand it. Therefore, in small value items, our safety valve is, where is it coming from? And if we are able to associate a geography to the product, we feel satisfied. So now comes to the next thing. We say, okay, is it an Alfonso mango? Then you will pick it up and you will smell it. Can you just go back to that slide? Yeah. So we smell the Alfonso mango. Why do we smell it? Because in our minds, we know that the Alfonso has a very distinctive smell. The word distinctive is very important, because you came across the word distinctive while you learned about trademarks. So trademarks are distinctive marks or signs or indications. Likewise, in this particular area of subject, we are looking at goods which carry distinctive qualities, characteristics, features which belong or come to that set of goods because of the region in which it is produced. So it is a reputation which is linked to the region. So we are able to trace this particular Alfonso mango to a certain district of Maharashtra, and we say, okay, since it has that particular color, since it has that particular smell, it belongs to that region only. And that gives us satisfaction, because then it tells us that it is an authentic produce. But the story is not over. I pay the money, I buy the mangoes, I cut it, and I put it in my mouth. And then I realize that it's not the same. So then I go running and hunting for the seller. And I will say, Aapne humko kya becha? आपने जो बेचा वो हापूस नहीं है. We will हापूस means Alfonso. It's not Alfonso because it doesn't taste like Alfonso. From inside, it doesn't smell like Alfonso. So we feel cheated. So this is the importance of the subject we are studying, where we are paying money. I repeat again, we are paying a price for a certain reputation of the goods, which reputation is linked to its geography. How does it protect us? It protects us from unfair competition, which is the reason why trademarks have come up in the first place. It protects us from consumer fraud. It protects us from counterfeiting goods. For example, you will find lots of stuff in the market. For example, let me give you, you suddenly find advertisements which says Kanjivaram sarees for 500 rupees. Now you go to the shop and you look at it, and the first thing you realize is that this is a make-believe Kanjivaram sari, and it's not a real Kanjivaram sari, because no Kanjivaram sari can be sold for 500 rupees. So these are the kind of things that are happening in the marketplace, which makes you realize that the marketplace is full of unfair competition. And when there is so much unfair competition in the marketplace, we need these safety valves which give us assurance that the product we are buying is an authentic product, and that the product is what we call as a genuine product. Of course, as we go along, you will realize that even in this area of law, there has been so much innovation, and there has been so much importance that has been laid on proprietary knowledge. Intellectual property is nothing other than proprietary knowledge. That means you are laying claim on the knowledge, and you say that I own that knowledge. So when you own that knowledge, therefore, the question that arises next is that it must be protected. Any proprietary knowledge must be protected, be that patents, be that through trademarks, be that through copyrights, be that through industrial designs, or be that through geographical indications. I'm not going into plant varieties and semiconductors. So these are all areas of law that has been built around to protect proprietary knowledge, and that is the intellectual property that has been created by people. Vishal, next slide, please. So we go into the evolution of GI. How did GI happen? I don't know whether you are aware that trademarks, perhaps, is one of the most ancient of the intellectual properties that we have. Very ancient civilizations like the Sumerian civilization, Mohenjo-daro, Harappan civilizations, you name the civilizations, have all shown us or thrown evidence to suggest that there was a system of property marks. May not be trademarks in themselves, but people had a system of identifying their property. Likewise, people, products, and geographies with a certain link is ancient, was always known. So certain products or produce or wares from certain areas, like for example, we say Chinese porcelain, dates back many, many thousand years ago. We have, let's say we have silks. We have many different, we have Mayan pottery, which is going back to Mayan civilization. So all of these are very old and they have always been there. So to put a finger and say it started from so and so year is very difficult. Come to India. I just mentioned Mohenjo-daro Harappan civilization. India is an ancient land. India is full of geographical indications in the sense that we have a lot of traditional knowledge and we have a lot of traditional arts and crafts, and many of them have been protected through the ages till date in India. So it's also agricultural produce that we are producing, and all of them, therefore, there was a need felt that for all of them, we need to create a body of law to protect them. Historically, going back into the international arena, geographical indications, first mention of it was done in Paris Convention. As I'm repeating, it was always there, but the earliest mention of it was in 1883 Paris Convention. Subsequently, Madrid Agreement in 1891 mentioned indications of source. All right. I'm not getting into too much to tell you, except to tell you that WTO and TRIPS, as far as intellectual property goes, were game changers. So when TRIPS came about as part of WTO mandate in 1995, all the countries were asked to overhaul their laws, including India. And we were then asked to create a separate body of law, which is geographical indication, and we legislated upon it in the year 2000. And that's what's happened, and that's how we have created. Earlier, geographical indication was recognized in India, was understood, but it was part of a small portion of the trademark law. So people did understand that even geographical produce needed to have some kind of identifications on it, but it was treated as part of trademark law. Subsequently, post 2000, we now have a separate act. Vishal, next slide, please. Separate act to deal with geographical indications. So this is some legal concepts, terminologies that are used with geographical indication. In some countries, they are called in different forms and different formats. Some countries have a sui generis system, but by and large, people follow these three formats. So if you look at this diagram before you, it's an inverted pyramid. And because it's an inverted pyramid, you would realize that we are going from the broadest to the narrowest. We are going from the most broad terminology to the most specific terminology, and that is appellation of origin. So when you're just indicating a geography, which is not linked to a reputation, for example, any item made in India will say made in India. Not necessarily an item linked to the geography. It could be anything, right? So very broad, made in England, made in US, made in India, that's an indication of source. There is another type of indication of source where no geographical name is there. But moment that name is used, people understand that it is from a certain geography. For example, think about it. When we use the word basmati, no geography is mentioned. But by the very nature of the name basmati, I think the whole world knows that it is a produce from India. Just as much the whole world knows feta cheese is a produce of Greece. So it's just like that. Certain products become indications of source without the mention of a geography. The most popular name, which is mid-range in terms of application, is geographical indication. The condition here is that the product must be linked to the geography, must be linked to a reputation coming from that geography. So if I am saying Nagpur oranges, I am therefore saying that there are oranges and oranges and oranges, but those that are coming from Nagpur are a different species and therefore they taste differently, just like sometime back I mentioned to you Alfonso mangoes. All right, that is the kind of indication we in India are following, which we call geographical indication. There are some countries which believe in following appellation of origin. Appellation of origin means name which will definitely have a geography mentioned in it. So it will mention the geography and it will tell you why that geography is giving a certain reputation to the product. Now, in India, as I said, we have opted for geographical indication, which seems to fit in even products like basmati and feta. It is any indication, any sign, any symbol, any name. All right, Vishal, next slide, please. So we go on to the Act and what has happened in the Geographical Indication Act. So when we look at the definitions, we obviously have to begin with the definition of geographical indication. See how well thoughtfully it has been written. The first thing it says is it is any indication, means it is any word, any symbol, any identification mark, which identifies certain goods. Now, those goods have been classified into three categories. Even TRIPS does not make this classification that India has done. It's classifying agricultural, natural, and manufactured goods. So the three areas of goods are very clear. In India, we have very typical agricultural produce belonging to different geographies. For example, in south of India, we grow coffee. In the northeast of India, we grow tea. Not that we don't grow tea in south of India, but the Nilgiri tea is quite different from the Assam tea. So when we are looking at different areas of India, we find that there are different agricultural produce. So like I was just thinking, I said, this ICFI is situated in Dehradun. Dehradun is a beautiful hill station. But immediately what comes to mind is Dehradun basmati rice. So Dehradun has become very famous for its basmati rice. So likewise, different areas, different geographies, different regions of India have become famous for different produces. Could be agriculture, could be natural. For example, you have Kolar gold mines. So there gold is being produced. Different areas, as I'm saying. And apart from that, we have manufactured goods. Now, in case, I'm going to the last line, in case of manufactured goods, it could be a reputation that is linked to the way of production, to the processing, to the preparation, which takes place in this region or locality. What comes to mind very interestingly is Bikaneri bhujia. Now, bhujia is a food item. It's not as if bhujia is grown in Bikaner, but Bikaner was famous for making the kind of bhujiyas. Now, you know what those bhujiyas are. And over a period of time, and why I'm mentioning this today, is it's very interesting to know that a pure geographical indication has grown to such an extent that it has become today $1 billion industry. So Bikaneri Bhujia is part of India's billion-dollar industry in the terms of quantity of bhujias that it's manufacturing, with, of course, Haldiram's being a 5,000, more than 5,000 crore empire. So this is based on the produce coming from a particular region. Now, what we are therefore saying is that the agricultural natural manufactured goods must originate in that specific territory, region, or locality, and it must have a given reputation, characteristic, or quality which is linked to the geography of origin. So, once again, I'm explaining all this needs to be woven together for us to protect a geographical indication. This is what the law is asking. So I have repeated then what is indication. I have repeated then what are goods, and I go to the category of the kind of geographical indications. Vishal, next slide, please. Here we will see the other provisions of the law. So what has the Geographical Indications Act created? Number one, it has created a specific dedicated registry only for the registration of geographical indications. The immediate question that comes to mind is, why would anyone want to register their geographical indication? Answer is very simple. There are certain, see, India at the end of the day has a lot of people who are quite poor and who are basically farmers and who are only interested in making agricultural produce, or they are weavers, artisans, craftsmen who are not the rich and the elite. They are living, their livelihood depends on what they make or what they produce. And so, if they are using their intellect to create a particular kind of a product, then that investment in that product needs to be protected. What I just mentioned to you is like I go to buy a Kanjivaram sari and I see that it is not a Kanjivaram. It's definitely a fake. So if I use the word fake, that means somebody has stolen the idea of a Kanjivaram sari and is making it in another geography and is selling it as a Kanjivaram sari. And by doing that, is taking away the right of a genuine producer of Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu. These are the problems. So that is why, to protect the artisans, to protect the craftsmen, to protect the farmers, to protect the horticulturists, we need such an act where the community comes together and registers a GI and says, this is the genuine product. Therefore, this must be protected. So if this is done, then they get what is known as a GI tag. Today, GI tag has become a tag of authenticity. So if you find a product which says this is a GI produce, you know you are buying a genuine stuff in the marketplace. All right. So as I said, we maintain a register. There is a particular process which I will do in the next slide, what you need to fulfill and what you need to fill in order to file for a geographical indication. But what is important to note that India keeps two registers. One is part A of the register and one is part B of the register, which altogether forms one. But basically, the part A of the register gives you the history of the product, the history and geography of the product. Actually, the history and the geography of the product. Part B is very interesting. Part B keeps a list of who are the authorized users of this GI so that we don't have fakes in the marketplace. It tells you so and so, so and so, so and so. The proprietor is an association, and these are the members of that association. This is how Part B is maintained in India. So, who can own a GI? Now, I must mention something very interesting to you, why I love this subject so much. This subject is basically to do with the poor of India. It's a pro-poor protection, as we call it. As I already finished mentioning to you, this is of a working community who is going to protect their intellectual property, not singly, but together as a community. So it's very interesting. So suppose I say Kolhapuri chappals. Everybody is using the word Kolhapuri chappals. But actually speaking, Kolhapuri chappals began with a group of small producers, footwear producers. They were footwear manufacturers who put a certain kind of design, a certain kind of sensibility into a footwear. And that footwear became a fashion trend. The footwear caught on not only in India, but everywhere. So today what has happened? Everyone, everywhere is producing a Kolhapuri chappal. You can go to Punjab, you will find Kolhapuri chappals. We can come to Dehradun and we will find Kolhapuri chappals. We can go to Kerala and we'll find Kolhapuri chappals. So what has happened is this kind of commerce is taking away the rightful share of the actual Kolhapuri chappal makers. Now that's the only thing they know to make the Kolhapuri chappals. But they are slowly getting displaced out of their business by so much of unfair competition. So therefore, we need to know who are the genuine producers of a particular product. And generally, we find in geographical indication, though it can be taken in the name of a single entity or a person, it is preferred that the geographical indication goes to an association of producers. So the producers, farmers, horticulturists may get together and create an association. I will show you enough examples of them, and you will find how they make or they create or protect their geographical indications. The Act also prohibits certain geographical indications. It will not allow you to register a geographical indication if it finds that this application is mischievous, if it finds that this application is obscene, if it finds that this application is likely to mislead and misinform consumers, etc., etc. On many grounds, it may not register a geographical indication. All right. One is prohibition, the other is it may not register, which is two separate things. One is outright prohibited, and the other is if they are not satisfied that it meets all the criteria of registration of geographical indication, it's not going to register. Interesting for you to know that Hyderabadi biryani was not given a geographical indication because they could not produce documents to say how did it originate in Hyderabad. So interesting, right? So these are the kind of things that the Act is protecting. Of course, after a geographical indication is advertised by the GI registry, any member or any producer group or producer community from the public may oppose that application on the grounds that it is not fair or it has been done fraudulently, etc., etc. Having said all of this, must also tell you, next slide please, Vishal, that once an application is rejected, it's not necessary that it is rejected forever. You may try and apply again for that particular application. We come to what I was mentioning to you, what are the registration particulars? To tell you very quickly, we have to give the story. Remember, I told you this is all about storytelling. So we have to establish how a certain story has come to be associated with a particular product. So with a particular product, for example, we mentioned Alfonso mangoes. So one has to say how, the famous Albuquerque got the Alfonso seed from Portugal. It was planted in and around the Ratnagiri district, Goa, etc. And how the mango took root in that region. Same thing with Feni. Feni is a very reputed product, a premium product of Goa. Cashew Feni it is called. But what you all must know is cashew is not indigenous to India. Once again, it is brought by the Portuguese. And then the Goans there derived a method of creating the Feni. So the process of making Feni is very Goan. And they came about and, they created this particular process of making the Feni, and therefore it is original to Goa. So we have to show and give the story. We also have to give the class of goods, just like in trademarks, the class of goods in which the GI will apply. Very important also to give the map. Very important to give the map. And why I'm saying map is, in the last slide, I mentioned to you about homonymous geographical indications. Homonyms are same sounding words. Same soundings, identical sounding words. So now, for example, I say basmati. Now, if you look at the regions in India growing basmati, there are 7 to 8 states. 7 states have got it registered. 8 states is still fighting for it, saying that we grow basmati. So now map becomes very important. Are they the same regions, or are they grown in clusters in a particular region? So we have to look into the geography to know, is the attribute of that rice or of that particular produce because of the geography. All right. Now, for example, I mentioned to you tea, and I said northeast of India produces tea. Now, even in the northeast, there is a difference between Darjeeling tea and Assam tea. One is very fine, the other is a little full-bodied or darker tea. And both do not command the same price in the marketplace. The price is different for different producers based on the kind of quality and based on the kind of geographical attribute in that particular produce. So this is very important, and therefore the map of the region becomes very important. I just mentioned to you Kolhapuri chappals. You know, Kolhapuri chappals took more than 10 years to get a geographical indication because there was so much war going on between the producers of Kolhapuri chappal. Kolhapur is in Maharashtra, but it borders Karnataka. There's a region in Karnataka who said that the actual Kolhapuri chappals began there. So finally now Kolhapuri chappals have been given, GI status has been given both to the Bidar region of Karnataka as well as to Kolhapur in Maharashtra. So, you know, the map therefore takes a very, very prominent or a predominant aspect in geographical indication to say where exactly you are produced. Then there must be a statement containing the particulars of the producers. The producers are the authorized users of the geographical indication. Vishal, next slide, please. And therefore, we now go into a snapshot of how the GI registry looks. If you see number 1, I'm not sure whether you are able to see it, but number 1 is Darjeeling tea. Now, Darjeeling tea was the first GI to be filed in India and the first GI to be registered. So based on that, you will find some different GIs. And against that is details, view. So it will tell you whether the GI has been registered or not, what is the class of goods, etc. All of that you will find in the registry. Vishal, next slide, please. I'm now going on to something far more general from the law. So what does the GI do? What is the promise of a GI? As I already mentioned to you, it is a certificate of authenticity. It tells you that it is an authentic product, a product that has come from the intellectual labor of a community. So the community has worked towards creating this product. And that community resides in a particular geographical location or a region. And much of that community's ability, craft, produce, is linked to the specific, peculiar, typical traits of that geography. That is why it becomes very, very important in saying that it is a promise that the GIs give of authenticity. Also, there is a certain exoticness associated with GIs. The exoticness is the fact that it tells you some kind of a story. So suppose I say, you know, Kolhapuri chappals are very old. Maybe so-and-so Maharaj was wearing these chappals even during this time. So you feel like, so-and-so Maharaj was wearing, even I should wear. So it's added a kind of a mysticness, mysteriousness to the entire product. And you say, okay, it's a certain kind of aura with the geography and therefore we should buy it. There's a very interesting survey that was done in Europe, and they found that most consumers were willing to pay a premium price for a GI tagged product. So I don't know how much you know about international products that have become famous because of GI. But one product that comes to mind, and I must share that name, is something that we are doing all the time. We are using it all the time for our celebrations, and that is champagne. Champagne is one of the world's most famous GI product, and France guards it most fiercely because Champagne is a district in the south of France. And that district has a climatic condition which is very unique, and because of which the grapes in that grown in that district of France is also very different, just like I mentioned Nagpur oranges. So the grapes are beautiful, and the kind of drinks that we get out of those grapes are what we are calling as champagne. Now, France is so fierce about its protection of champagne that countries all over, TRIPS has mandated this, that we are not allowed to use the word champagne. So let's say manufacturers of wine in India, like for example, Sula. Can Sula come out with a product which says Sula champagne? And the answer is no. No one in the world except producers of Champagne district in France are allowed to use the word champagne. So this is the importance of geographical indication, where people are willing to pay so much money to buy a GI product. Today, if you look at the number of applications, India is beating almost all records. Today, we have 695 applications, 370 registered GIs, and 223 pending GIs. So it's interesting for you to know what this will translate into for India. One simple thing that I can tell you this: the more GIs we will have, the more fairer competition will be there in the marketplace, the more exports will be there in the marketplace, and India will end up making more money. I will give you the amount of Darjeeling tea that India is exporting, and what kind of money therefore is being made out of India's premium GI, which is Darjeeling. So champagne is to France what Darjeeling tea is to India in terms of a GI product. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, Vishal, we will run through these slides a little quickly because these are all the GIs that I wanted to show. So can I go back to the last slide? The last slide. The first one on Kanjivaram saris. Yeah. Textiles, first one, yes. So if you quickly look at these are all the very popular exported fabrics of India. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. These are the famous embroideries that are there in India. Again, like for example, Fulkari in Punjab, Sujini in Bihar and Kashmir. All of them are very valuable, lots of money. I mean, all designers are using these embroideries for a very high price. These are the famous paintings in India, massively exported, which is Thanjavur painting from Tamil Nadu, Madhubani painting from Bihar. Next slide. We go on to the Varli paintings also. Varli paintings are tribal paintings. And I will show you one of the slides how these paintings are now GI tag has been given to Maharashtra, has been given to Dadra, Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu and parts of Gujarat. So all of them have this Varli painting, and these are the famous Varli artists from Maharashtra. All right, next slide, please. Next slide, please. These are Ganjifa products. They were very ancient. Ganjifa cards were used for playing in during the Mughal period. Now many states are using the Ganjifa cards. These are the Ganjifa cards. So predominantly It used to be made in Bihar too, but predominantly it is being made in Madhya Pradesh. We go on to the next slide, please. Next slide, please, Vishal. This is Kurk oranges and the Alfonso that I talked about. We now come to a lot of food products that are being given GI in India. This is Mathura Petha. This is Tirupati Laddu. This is the Pan. Next slide, next slide. And these are the chilies. I don't know if you know this. It's a very interesting thing that in Assam, the spiciest chilies, one of the spiciest chilies in the world, Bhut Charokia, is from Assam, and they have taken a geographical indication on these kind of chilies. Then you have kebabs, the Galauti kebab, etc. Next slide, please, Vishal. This is the cashew fenny that I was talking about, and cashew fenny also went into a lot of problems. Finally got the GI, then we had a producers fight over it. So now it has gone to the Producers Association and it's being exported a lot apart from sales in India. Go on to the next slide, please. We come to trademarks and geographical indications. Can call them sisters. They are close, but they are having different objects. So trademark is a private monopoly right. Whereas, as I mentioned to you, GI doesn't belong to an individual unless the individual is the only one producing the GI. GI is a community right. That's why people are so fond of GI, because it belongs to the whole community as opposed to a patent, trademark, or a copyright. All right. Now, trademarks complement GIs. Similarly, GIs complement trademark. But what you must remember is that in a trademark, it is the adoption of a very distinctive word, mark, or sign. In GI, we are not saying that at all. There is no need to adopt any distinctive mark or sign except adopt the reputation linked to the geography. So it is basically adopting a name linked to the geography, which highlights the reputation of that particular produce and the geography. All right. So, for example, this particular point that I have made over here, I just now said that when I think of Dehradun, I think of Dehradun basmati rice. Now, what happens over here is you find that there are so many producers of basmati rice. How do I distinguish one producer from another producer? And the only way to do that is to create trademarks. So you have Dehradun basmati rice, you have Kohinoor basmati rice, you have Lal Kila basmati rice, which are all then, Dehradun basmati rice is not a trademark, but I'm saying Kohinoor basmati rice, Lal Kila basmati rice, they are all trademarks. So you've taken a trademark, and then thereafter there would be Amritsari basmati rice, Dehradun basmati rice, some other basmati rice, which is then linked to the geography. All right. So to repeat again, we are talking about trademarks, where trademarks are given for products linked to a geography. For example, Swiss chocolates, Swiss knives. These are indications of sources, but they are not geographical indications in the sense we are talking about. So like, for example, if I'm talking about Swiss chocolates, one of the famous trademarks in that is Lindt, because Lindt is a famous trademark, all right? But in geographical indications, we are not going like that. We are going with a reputation linked to a geography, just like I mentioned just now to you. For example, champagne. For example, Parma ham. For example, Colombian coffee. So all this is linked to a geography. Next slide, please. Next slide, Vishal. Now, very important thing, this particular slide that I have done is very, very important. So essentially, what is a GI tag doing? A GI tag is giving you a certificate of authenticity. Just like you have an ISI mark, you have a BIS hallmark, you have a PGS organic, FSSI, These are all certification marks on the goods. So see, now I have a GI tag. Now how do I protect this tag? I have to have some kind of indication on the goods to say that this is a GI product. So almost all producer associations have come up with their own marks. This mark that I have given Darjeeling, this is Tea Board's mark for Darjeeling tea. Tea Board has other marks for other tea, but this is a certification mark for Darjeeling tea. This is Cotadoria. They have come out, the Cotadoria Weavers Association has come out with this mark. And this mark is then woven into all the Cotadoria products, the Cotadoria. What happens is you stop fakes in the marketplace. You are giving absolute protection to the GI producers. We go on to the next slide. Along with the certification marks, we also have what is known as collective marks. Next slide, Vishal. Vishal, next slide. These collective marks are just like you have a Tata mark or a Unilever mark or a Reliance mark or Godrej mark, which is telling you that this is a Godrej company, Tata company, and under that you have various products, or under that you have various brands. So likewise, we have over here collective marks. So this is something very interesting for you to know, that one association may have again various groups underneath it. And each of those associations would have their marks. So for example, if you look at this particular one that I have written over here, this is Parma Ham Producers Association, Consorzio Prosciutto di Parma. They are only producing Parma ham. But there are various producers in that, are producer associations. So the collective mark is coming from this. Okay, then we have Parmigiano Reggiano, which is again a kind of cheese from Italy, which is world famous. I have given over here Kanjivaram Weavers Association's collective mark. All right, and now I have given you Tea Board mark. This is Tea Board mark. Under Tea Board, you have Darjeeling tea, Assam tea, various teas that are there. And therefore, this collective mark is also very important in geographical indication. So just to tell you the hierarchy, you will have a collective mark, you will have a certification mark, and you will have a trademark, which will then protect the geographical indication from all sides and make it into an authentic product in the marketplace. Next slide, please. Vishal, next slide, please. In spite of all that I have told you, you will find that we are not able to protect geographical indications. And this is relating to the same thing that I mentioned to you about Kolhapuri chappals. Today, whole India is producing Kolhapuri chappals. Whole India is producing Pashmina shawls. Though Pashmina is supposed to come from Kashmir, but you will find Pashmina in all roads of Bombay, where you will get the Pashmina shawl or Pashmina stoles for 250 rupees. Yet if you go into the history, you will find that Pashmina is such an exotic item. So what has happened? As simple as I always say, Linking Road has made, the world designers famous because of the fakes and the counterfeit products that are found in every nook and corner of big cities all over the world. So any product that becomes famous, that product is thereafter kind of reproduced in a variety of forms and fashions. And most consumers are not so clever, or most consumers are not so careful, or are not so discerning, or are not so knowledgeable to understand the difference between a fake and a genuine item. Most consumers, and I'm sure many of you, even I for that matter, when I go to buy, I will not go and look for a GI tag. I will not look for a certification mark. I will say, okay, isne ye bola, and we tend to buy it. So this large scale, unchecked commoditization has created what we call as dilution of brand. So first brand becomes famous and then brand becomes diluted. Another example of brand dilution, at least in India, is Xerox. I'm just giving you a kind of parallel, for example, we want to photocopy anything, the first thing that comes to our lips is to say, I'm going to Xerox this. Xerox is the name of the company. Xerox is the name of the brand. But the way we talk, we say we will Xerox it. So the moment we use it as a verb, we have diluted the brand of that particular company. Like for us, all the youngsters here today, what we will say, we will Google it when we want to search something. So Google has become synonymous with search, and therefore brand gets diluted. This is exactly what happened. So PepsiCo came out with their Leher brand, and the Leher brand came out with Bikaneri Bhujia, and there was a big hullabaloo about it. How can PepsiCo use the word Bikaneri Bhujia, which is a geographical indication? And PepsiCo then wanted to trademark Bikaneri Bhujia. Of course, they were not allowed. So this is when such things are allowed, then the craftsmen will lose out. So I have given you examples of brand dilution: plaster of Paris, Portland cement, India rubber, Chinese cuisine, Chinese lanterns, Amritsar shawl, Dijon mustards, UD cologne. They have all diluted the brands of those geographical indication. Why I'm saying this is, today it is very difficult to take or get geographical tags for these items that I have mentioned. Next slide, please. So this is an example of brand dilution I have shown in this slide. Leher Bikaneri Bhujia is here, so you can see that. All right. Then we go on to the next slide, please. What are the challenges of GI? I have particularly dealt with all the artisans because of the lectures that I take in National Institute of Fashion Technology, and they get the tribals and they get the the villagers and the artisans from the villages to talk about what they are making. And I've had these people making Kolhapuri chappals in tears, saying that we just don't know what to do, because we have people who are producing fake, who are able to invest a lot of money in advertising, and they are exporting large scale, and our shops are practically shut. This is the plight. So, the problem is there is no unity amongst the associations. People who want to come join in for the associations are not willing to pay membership fees. So a lot of problems, also a lot of competition in terms of homonymous GIs. So if Madhya Pradesh is making something, immediately Odisha, immediately the other states, Andhra, start making the same kind of product. So obviously, you have to share the revenue with so many people. So for example, you take Patola in Andhra, or you take Ikat. So there is an Andhra Ikat, there is a Odisha Ikat. It's like going on. We say Tasar. Now Tasar is being manufactured all over India. So it's become a huge problem. There is very little awareness. There is very little education in these clusters. And so therefore, these clusters are not being developed the way they should and they have to be. Next slide, please. I'm taking one of the best examples in marketing of GI, and this is the case of Colombian coffee. Colombia is a smaller country than Brazil, but Colombia has richer coffee. However, their coffee was not coming up in the ranking in the world, and Brazil was known to be providing the best coffee. Then finally, the Coffee Growers Association in Colombia got together, and all the producers got together, and they decided that the only way they can make headway in the world is to spend on marketing and advertising and brand building. It's very interesting to know that this small group from Colombia, hired a New York advertising agency that created a fictitious character called Juan Valdez. They created a picture of this man with his donkey, the mule, and hand-picking coffee beans. And this advertisement caught around the world. They came out with good taglines: richest coffee in the world, 50% tax bracket, 100% Colombian. When buying coffee, buy only Colombian. So this created almost a 96% awareness in the world. And suddenly Colombian coffee became the most premium coffee in the world. Very interesting is the last line that I have written. The strategy helped them raise their revenues from 9.1 million USD to 13.2 million USD in the span of a few years. Next slide, please. In India, we are going to take the story of Darjeeling tea. Next slide, please. This is all the pictures. This is to show you collective mark. This is collective mark. These are all trademarks of Colombian coffee. So we go to Darjeeling tea. This is to show that, very interestingly, in why people are promoting Darjeeling tea is almost 50% of the plantation workers are women. So it has helped in enabling women in this northeast district of India. Go on to the next slide, please. So I will show you when exactly tea board and the kind of strategies that they employed to make Darjeeling tea a premium tea in the world. So, of course, this is some statistic to show you that the kind of tea that is being grown in India. Darjeeling is in West Bengal, as you all know. How many tea plantations? We have 87 tea plantations there for Darjeeling tea, not the entire tea plantations of India, all right? And the Tea Act was set up in 1953. Under it, they created Tea Board, and which is now handled by the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. This particular GI tag is held by Darjeeling Tea Planters Association, along with some other tea councils. Next slide, please. Now, what they did, interestingly, the Tea Board of India, they created first a logo in 1983, and they registered it as a trademark. One of the most brilliant things that they could do. It's so important for GI owners and GI producers to first create a trademark. So they did that. They not only registered the trademark in India, they registered the trademark in 23 countries in the world. So everywhere, Darjeeling is protected, all right? Then the first geographical indication to be applied post 2000 in 2003 was Darjeeling tea. And of course, they have also hired a kind of we'll call it a detective agency. We actually call it a monitoring agency, which is monitoring world over who is abusing and misusing the Darjeeling mark. So since they own this mark, they were able to file suits in various countries, and they were able to win suits in most countries for misuse of the Darjeeling mark. One of the cases is that they had Bulgari, which is a famous fashion label. They asked them to withdraw the Darjeeling tea fragrance that they introduced for men. So these are some of the interesting stories with respect to Darjeeling tea. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Vishal, will you please take it to the next slide? This is one of my favorite stories because this, no, Aranmula Kannadi.
Yes, ma'am.
Earlier one. No.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
This is a 500-old traditional knowledge and comes from Kerala. There's a place called Aranmula in Kerala. And it's nothing else but a very shiny mirror, which is offered as part of the offerings to the deity. But has a very interesting story of how a group of metal men or ironsmiths, as we call them, coppersmiths actually, they ran away from Tamil Nadu and they sought refuge in the kingdom, in one of the kingdoms in Kerala. And the king over there told them that you have to do something for us. So they sought refuge in the temple in that kingdom. So the thing was very simple: create something for this temple that everyone will remember. And so they worked on it, and they came out with a shiny metal. This metal is basically an alloy. And the interesting thing for all of you to know is that it is a trade secret as to what goes into that alloy. All right. So today there are 19 registered craftsmen who belong to the Vishwa Brahmana community who make these mirrors. But from then to now, their plight has improved so much they are now selling almost 300 to 500 mirrors a month, as opposed to what was earlier. Of course, there are lots of fake and counterfeit Aranmula Kannadis. In the first slide, I had given a picture of Aranmula Kannadi. We go on to the next slide, please, Vishal. Next slide, Vishal. This is a snapshot of the registered GIs in India. And if you look at the registered GIs, you will find that maximum are in the areas of handicrafts, less in agriculture, even less in foodstuff. Finally, in manufactured products, it's slightly more than food product. Natural foods are only about 2%. All right. We go on to the next slide, please, Vishal. Very interesting for all of you to also realize that we have a lot of foreign GIs also. Lots of countries in the world have registered their GIs, but what seems interesting is most of them are wines and cheese. So you have a Peruvian liquor, which is alcohol, which is called pisco. We have champagne and cognac from France. We have Napa Valley wines from US, Scotch whiskey. Again, so many cases about Scotch whiskey, Brewers Association having filed suits against Indian producers. So you're not allowed to use the word Scotch or Scotch in India. And whoever liquor manufacturer has used this word or showed pictures of Scotsmen, etc., they have been asked to remove those kind of marks or labels. So these are some of the famous Prosecco wine from Italy, etc., and tequila from Mexico. Next slide. I have named it tug of Pashmina. Now, when I use the word tug of Pashmina, I think immediately you should understand that there is a war going on over Pashmina, and with whom we could have a war except other than with Pakistan. Why? Because Pashmina is very interesting. These are mountain goats, and these goats are found only in the northern portion of Ladakh. They are Chantangi goats, all right? And obviously, they are also in the Pak-occupied Kashmir, in the Gilgit and the Baltistan regions. So Pakistan says, even we are entitled to the mark Pashmina. Now, there's a whole lot of debate because it's Pak-occupied Kashmir, whether they can claim it or not claim it. But India did not even resist that claim. India then looked to see whether both the countries could jointly own the term Pashmina. And that did not happen. So finally, this Pashmina GI tag has been given to the Kashmir Craft and Development Association, which is manufacturing and selling Pashmina items. Pasham means hide, and actually it means a very golden light fur. So this golden light fur Pashmina is what is become pride of India, is also known in some countries as Kashmir, because the word Kashmir refers to woolens from Kashmir. So this kind of permutation combination around GI tags take place. And today we are the owners of the Pashmina tag. Likewise, Pakistan is fighting with India over the Basmati tag. I will take you to that particular case also. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Vishal. Vishal.
Ma'am, this slide Basmati.
Yes, ma'am.
Vishal, next slide, please.
This one, snapshot.
Done. I'm done with Pashmina.
Ma'am, I'm changing the slides, ma'am. Is it not visible to you?
Take it to the Basmati case. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
No, the first before this, not the case snapshot. Basmati.
Case
Before
snapshot.
before this slide. Okay. So the Lahore-based Basmati Growers Association has challenged. Go back to the earlier slide. Has challenged the Agriculture and Processed Food Exports Department Authority, which owns the Basmati tag in India. So Basmati tag has also come after a lot of war. There are 7 states: Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Haryana, HP, Delhi, Uttarakhand, UP. And MP is fighting for the Basmati tag. Now, MP is not a foothill of the Himalayas. The Basmati rice is grown because of the certain geography, and that is the foothill of the Himalayas. So that the subsoil, the Gangetic plains, has to be there for the Basmati to grow. However, today with all kinds of genetic engineering and with all kinds of agricultural technology and techniques, even MP is able to grow the Basmati. And because they are growing the Basmati, Madhya Pradesh is also demanding GI tag for the Basmati. So Madhya Pradesh has been refused the GI tag. Lahore has objected to Madhya Pradesh being given GI tag. However, GI tag has been given to these 7, but Lahore now says we want to give GI tag to Sindh. If you all give Madhya Pradesh, we will give Sindh. So these kind of wars are going on with Basmati. We go on to the next slide. This is just to show you what has happened. Next slide, please. I'll just rush through quickly. This is Rasgullas, very recent, the war between Bengal and Orissa. Bengal filed for Rasgulla in 2015 and Orissa objected, saying that they cannot claim Rasgulla because Rasgulla is supposed to have come from the Jagannath Puri temple in Odisha. Now, Bengal claims that their Rasgulla is different from the Rasagola from Odisha. So these various slight differences were brought out, highlighted. Methods of making the Rasgullas were different. And finally, Bengal got the GI status in 2015 and Orissa got the Odisha Rasagola for 2000. Next slide, please.
Yes, ma'am.
So these are
This one,
homonymous GIs. As I said, Basmati is being shared by so many states in India. Malabar pepper, Arabica coffee, Robusta coffee, Arabica coffee again with Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. So basically, there is now a lot of GI wars going on in India. We go on to the next slide. I'm going to omit this for you because I have already mentioned this, that protected wines and spirits, their names cannot be taken anywhere in the world. So as I said, Sula, imitation champagne, champagne style champagne, nothing. We cannot use those kind of words anymore.
next slide, ma'am.
The next slide, please.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, are you there?
So these are some of the world brands. This is Habanos cigars, Cuban cigars, very premium item. This is Parma ham. These are champagne. So likewise, this is feta cheese. Okay, next slide, please, Vishal. Vishal, next slide. So what are the benefits? What are the benefits of GI? As you can all understand, it has helped to improve livelihoods and lifestyles. Today, lots of them are doing very well. So there are cluster programs that have been undertaken by banks like NABARD or IDBI who have taken up a particular sector. Like, for example, very interesting for all of you to know is that there is a group of nomads towards the Gujarat Kutch region called, and they make what is famously called as Tangalia shawls. So the banks then decided to protect them, to get to bring in education and to make better and better products. So Tangalia shawls are today registered. Bidri works, which is an 800-year-old Persian craft coming from the Golgombas region, they have created Bidri works, which is fine silver inlay work. They have been protected. Traditional knowledge alive. It's a marketing tool, brand building exercise, increases exports, brings down unfair competition, cartelization, and abuses. So basically, it helps towards capacity building and economic improvement in the country. The last slide, please, Vishal.
Yes, ma'am. The slide is there, last slide. Ma'am, should I change the slide?
Yes, please, take it to the last slide.
The benefits of GI, ma'am, it is on that screen only. Is it not visible to you?
It's visible. I've finished explaining.
Okay, ma'am. Conclusion.
Yeah. So these are all the cluster programs. So there is one artisan who is doing Bidri work. This is Bidri work. These are all Bidri work, which is very difficult. They have to do it with the hand and the hand gets completely burnt. These are some handloom weavers. So lots of things. Like, for example, they have done a lot of cluster work with Badayun carpets, Muradabad brass works. So all of them have been benefited and have created. The last slide I have created is a slide called Go Local. So that was a Fab India advertisement, which I really liked very much. And I thought I must introduce this in my GI presentation because this captures the ethos of geographical indication. Go with respect to GI or with respect to any intellectual property, I'm okay to take, provided there is time. And I leave it to Vishal to decide.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a lovely and informative session, ma'am. Should I take on questions, ma'am? Some important questions are there by the participants.
Yes, please.
Right, ma'am. And the first question is, how to link geographical indication tag to a specific quality which is related to geographical environment along with its natural factors?
So to answer, I will give you an example. One of the products in the world which is very famous is called Sheffield cutlery. Okay. Now, when we are talking about cutlery, cutlery is manufactured by steel, in steel. So there is nothing linked to the geography except that it is produced there and it happens to be made over there. So it's just like, you know, like if I say Bombay is a hub for cotton, that's a fair statement because there are a lot of cotton plantations in Maharashtra. We have a lot of cotton crop. So it makes sense to say that textiles will be manufactured in Maharashtra. But to say in because wool is what into the geography of Kashmir. So we have to link the product to the geography, and that is how the linkage will be established. So as I said earlier also, what happens is you are asked to justify your claim for the GI tag. Anywhere in the world, any GI registry is going to say, please justify why you're claiming the GI. So you have to tell them how it came to be a GI. So you have to establish that with evidence. This is law.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Well, the next question to you is, does geographical indication have any legal rights on products?
I thought that's what I was explaining all this while. It's a law, right? So it's a tag, just like trademark. You get a trademark on your mark and under which you trade. And therefore, nobody can take away your trademark. Similarly, when you get a GI tag, then you are declaring to the whole world that you are the authentic producer of these goods or items. So nobody else can then copycat you, you know. So that's what we are trying to say, why GI tags are so important.
Great, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And the next question is, what is the relationship between traditional knowledge and geographical indication?
So in many cases, many cases, you will find that the item that is being produced, for example, food products, you find that very much in food products, or you find that very much in textiles, that they are related to a particular knowledge that maybe a group of families knew or only one family knew. So something like this. So like for example, in Gujarat, we have what is known as Patan Patola. It's a kind of a weave. It's a kind of a sari, all right? Now this, actually speaking, 700 years say, एक ही family was producing this Patan Patola. And therefore, the Patan Patola became extremely expensive all over the world and nobody else knew the method of doing it. However, with technology coming in, people slowly learned how to make, and there was some leakage. So when you keep a knowledge, confidential, we call it trade secret. So actually, if you see, geographical indication is a very unique combination of traditional knowledge, trade secrets, and a reputation linked to the geography. I just mentioned Aranmula Kannadi to you all. Now, Aranmula Kannadi, I told you, what is the mix in the alloy? Nobody knows, except those 19 registered users. All that people know is that they use the mud from the riverbed, and it's a kind of an alloy that is made. So, and this, as I mentioned to you, it's going on for so many 100 years, more than 500 years. So it's a traditional knowledge, it's a trade secret, and it is linked to the geography. So most of the times you will find many such items. How basmati was grown earlier, that also was traditional knowledge. How lots of items in India, agricultural produce, are grown is traditional knowledge. Sometimes, apart from it being traditional knowledge, they are also trade secrets. And we find abundance of them in the area of geographical indications.
And thank you so much, ma'am. And the last question for you for the day is, how do Indian lawyers deal with conflicting definition and legal requirement to constitute geographical indication under international document and the domestic act?
No, why would there be a conflict? You will have to explain to me, whoever is asking this question, why would there be a conflict? First of all, I want to explain to you all that when we have international treaties in themselves are not laws. We give effect to a treaty by creating domestic laws, incorporating all the requirements of the treaty. So when a treaty is signed by member nations, the member nations agree that they will give force to the treaty by incorporating it through domestic legislations. So there's never any conflict between the treaty and the domestic legislations in that sense, in terms of interpretation. Because when I make a domestic legislation, I can go a little above what has been. So in fact, with TRIPS, we always say there are minimum standards for the protection of intellectual property rights. So when we say minimum standards of protection for the protection of intellectual property rights, we are saying patents must be protected at least for 20 years, which means to say that you can go in for 22 years, 25 years, which nobody has done, but not less than 20 years. So that's the minimum bar. That's what we are doing. Conflict will come between two domestic legislations, between the laws of my country and the laws of another country. But in the areas of geographical indication, by and large, these conflicts, there have been lots of conflicts. For example, there have been conflicts between Spain and France. There have been conflicts between France and Switzerland. But finally, a neutral body has to take the call. And the neutral body in most cases has been the WTO's dispute resolution body. and that will decide in whose favor they will adjudicate the matter. Okay, so by and large, as I'm saying, there has been no conflict between the international treaty and the domestic legislation based on that treaty.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering the questions and the session. Now, I would like to pass on the mic to our academic coordinator, ma'am, for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Vishal. Ma'am, it's been wonderful to listen to this lecture. You have concised and given a complete understanding of geographical indication and with all examples. And I'm sure that the participants have learned a lot about GIs and how it is implemented, with giving examples of what are the various GIs that we have and the various disputes that we have relating to GIs. So thank you once again, ma'am. It's a pleasure for us to have you here. On behalf of ICFI University, Dehradun, I would request you that in the future coming days also, it will be a great honor for us to have you at our university. Thank you once again.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, is Dean sir here? Dean sir?
I think his connectivity is not there.
Okay, ma'am. Then we should close the meeting then, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.